Hi, welcome back. I have the best guest ever again, Isaac Weishaupt, and we are on the other side of our Las Vegas live show. What did you think? Did you have fun?
I did. I had much more fun than I anticipated. You know, the I think, you and Jay were saying about how basically how fun it was. And I thought, and the whole time leading up to it, because I'm kind of a nervous dude and I got a lot of anxiety, I kind of was questioning if I should really do it. I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this. And everyone showed up proper and I had a great time. So I'm already trying to think of like how I can do this again. And I originally I thought, well, I'll try to get one done in Salt Lake where I live in the summer or fall. That's not gonna work. It'll have to be like winter if I do it. But yeah,
Mhm.
I'm already trying to think of like how I can do it again because I was like, dude, that was a great time. So yeah. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on to there. That was cool.
Yeah, it's so different to meet the people that you're actually talking to because when we do this, we just sit in a room by ourselves, with our laptop and our
Yeah.
microphone and our books and our notes and our crazy ideas. But when you actually get to see the people nodding along with you in your talk and they're getting it, they're grokking it. um,
Yeah.
and then afterwards they come up to you and they thank you. And, it's just such a fun time. It's like, how often do you get to have a big party where everybody is the same, on the same intellectual kind of level, right?
Yeah, totally. And I had multiple concerns about multiple things, but I mean, you're right. It's lonely when you're podcasting and researching and presenting the information because you're in your little office or studio or whatever and man, it put a lot of things into perspective for me that because I've been doing we've both been doing this a very long time and you go through phases, right? Because when I first started talking about these subjects and blogging and stuff, I'll never forget. I don't know if I shared this before, but I'll never forget that I had my blog going and people started. I saw like the page views going up, 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 right? And I remember I put on like Google ads at the beginning, and I remember I made like $5 a month for several months, and I was so excited for that. I said, "Oh wow!" And I was going to subscribe. I remember I was going to subscribe to the Ancient Aliens journal magazine that they had because I was really
Yeah.
into Ancient Aliens at the time, and it was just incredible. And then things they just expand, 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 and you lose track, you lose sight of how exciting it is to be a part of this community because I grew up loving all things weird and wacky and conspiracy related and um it's a huge honor to have people want to listen to me and you lose sight of that and when you're just
Mhm.
doing this and throwing it out to the world and not seeing the reaction people have. I mean, you read comments and people send nice messages and those are great. Those mean a lot to me, but um there's something different with it's like doing a Zoom meeting versus in-person meeting, it's a totally
Mhm.
different experience.
And once you get a little taste of that, I guess it's the energy, the love that comes from a crowd. I mean, I can see why people want to become a rock star because just that, the feeling of all of that energy coming towards you is kind of addicting. You have to be careful uh, for your ego or whatever. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. We might have one in Nashville in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be
Cool.
all new stuff, also with Courtney Turner. So we will be announcing that. Also, a couple people who came to the talk are interested in doing a documentary about my content that I gave at the live show, so that's gonna be fun. Also, someone sent us a book after he saw the show that me and you did last time called The Dark Gods. I haven't read it yet, I just got it, but I looked it up. It was like $1,000 on Amazon. He's like, well, I have two copies, so I'll send you one. So I've got
No
that really
way.
rare book, and I'm gonna study that for our final show, our third and final show, maybe coming in September. Me and Isaac are going to do. But let's just get right into today. So last time we talked about our hypothesis that is the alien invasion or the demonic overtaking of the world is being facilitated through technology, occult magic, and it also has to do with sexuality. So evoking demons into the world by using internet corn and trying to come in contact with the other side. So we talked about ancient aliens, the Watchers, the Nephilim, Anunnaki, Cain, Tubal-Cain, Gilgamesh, Babylon, Egypt, and the Book of Enoch. So now we're kind of getting up into, oh, we also talked about Greece, mystery schools, right? How the creation of the idea of theater and play acting was invoking gods into your own body for people to worship. We talk about the Dionysus mystery schools, cults, and a little bit about the gala, which I'm going to do a Rockfin show a little bit later today on what is a gala or a gali, which is the uh, devotees of the goddess who are identified by castration, self-mutilation, public displays of uh, transcendental music, just like cacophony, begging. So a lot of these topics that we are seeing today go back to the ancient world. But right now I want to focus on medieval times. And I know you've done a lot of work on like John Dee and Enochian magic. So just we're trying to make an outline of trying to be in contact with the other side throughout history. So a lot of magic comes from Solomon, actually, right? So the greater keys of Solomon and the lesser keys of Solomon are all about contacting angels and demons, respectively. And so you get into these medieval times and John Dee. And a lot of times, if not every time, it has to do with like wife swapping and, you know, polygyny, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
there's a lot to unpack with all that, and you're right to I guess a sort of recap or zoom out of what we're talking about here is and this is like your show, so I'm not trying to reframe what you're trying to go for here, but my perspective on it would be we're talking about a concept that's been around for hundreds and thousands of years of aliens or energy, including sex magic, in order to create a shift or bring entities into our world on some
mhm,
level.
mhm.
And all the occult sciences are rooted in sex magic. That's why Aleister Crowley and Kenneth Grant were talking so much about Tantra. And I told you last time we were talking that I was reading Kenneth Grant's book, Outside the Circles of Time, which is one of his Typhonian trilogy books.
Mhm.
And it's very dense. I'm probably around page 100 right now out of what seems like 1,000 pages.
Yeah. I know
And
I had to like learn Sanskrit to understand the book that I read, right?
oh,
Aleister
it,
Crowley and the Hidden God. Yeah.
that's even more fun. Yeah, yeah. This is my first Kenneth Grant book, and I've seen references to other books that I thought, man, I got to read these other ones too. But this one's taken forever. It's so dense, and it's because I'm obviously one of the uninitiated. I don't really understand the basis of a lot of the stuff, but what I do know, because Peter Levenda's books provide a bit of a translation or an interpretation of Kenneth Grant's work, that what one of the secrets of occult magic and all of these occult practices is sex magic or tantra. And like for instance, in the Kenneth Grant book, he talks about how when he was talking to Awaz, this entity, and he was just transcribing what Awaz was telling him, the word secret came up a lot, and the word ion, which is where he gets the Aeon of Horus, the New Age. And Kenneth Grant does this weird sort of way of explaining that secret ion is a coded way of saying, and I don't, this is going on YouTube, right?
Hmm.
I got to be careful with the words I say. If you put I'll just say, if you put those two words together as one word, that that describes something that in Tantra they call the kalas, and
Okay.
it's a thing that happens, and there's 16 different kalas, and they use these.
Yes.
It,
I talked about the Kalas on the Rockfin in the show called Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God because that's what the Kenneth Grant book was all about. So just
yeah.
to tip you off on what we're talking about, how do you say? I was using the joke wheezing the juice. Remember that movie Encino Man and Polly Shore's always like
Yeah,
wheezing the
the
juice.
wheeze, the
Okay, so
wheeze.
it's like lady juice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is part of a magical formula. And
Yeah.
the reason I'm bringing all that up is because if you look at you know, they bake they say that human sexuality is the gateway to functions happening below the conscious thought. All right. And that's what a lot of this stuff is about tapping into the subconscious and belief in different dimensions and stuff like this, or making contact with the dream world. And all of this goes back and if you look at a rough timeline to bring it back to John Dee in medieval times, I know that's where we're trying to start.
Mhm.
You go back to the book of Enoch and the time of Enoch with the fallen angels, the Watchers, and this is pre-flood time. Well, John Dee in the 1500s was able to basically make contact with entities that told him to transcribe this language with which they could speak to mankind. And this supposedly goes back to the time of the Garden of Eden, and God told Adam the same Enochian language and said, "Here's how you speak with me." I guess that's my interpretation of it.
Mhm.
So John Dee annotates the Enochian tablets, and these are later used by occultists. Like Joseph Smith contacted Moroni with it in the 1800s. Crowley contacted Lamb with it in the 1900s. And
Mhm.
then Jack Parsons, of course, did the same with the Babylon working. And from here, we go into what I think in part three we'll probably discuss is the atomic age and all of the UFO programs that have been done in secret.
Mhm.
So when we talk about John Dee, we're talking about an occultist who he worked for Queen Elizabeth in, you know, reading astrology, because astrology is one of the foundational arts of all occultism, reading the stars and interpreting the movement of the planets and
Mhm.
timing rituals, timing events, which is something that
Yes.
happens to this day.
And this is the point I always try to make is like if you have a priestcraft that knows astrology and the general population does not, you are going to have a group of people who can make predictions and make magic happen. Like thinking of that movie Apocalypto, so they know when the eclipse is coming, so they know that this is a natural phenomenon, not like the gods are angry at us or whatever, but they can do the sacrifices and then they can time it so that they make it look like they appeased the gods somehow, but it's just because they knew the timetables and everybody else was mystified.
Is that the Mel Gibson movie?
Mhm.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, it's great. You have to
Yeah, I
see.
need to watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so are you in the camp of they are still doing, you know, sort of stage magic with the planets? Like they knew an eclipse was coming, so they told people, you know, oh, there's this apocalyptic change coming, and in all reality, they were just tracking the movement of the stars.
Yes,
And
exactly. So
okay,
they're using technology that looks like magic.
oh,
Um,
okay,
right.
yeah, like well, I think it was Arthur C. Clarke has that quote about any sufficiently advanced civilization technology looks like magic or something,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Yeah, so as the story goes, John Dee employed the help of his scryer Edward Kelly to make contact with these entities, and you know they formulate the Enochian language that we talked about, and Dee and they kept talking to these aliens, these entities, these angels, as they say,
Hmm.
and they told John Dee all kinds of stuff about how he needed to usher in the eschaton, the end times. He thought he was going to. I thought he thought he was going to be around for the end of the world,
Hmm.
and that he was doing God's work to bring about the second coming of Christ. And he was supposed to assist in gathering all these souls for God and all kinds of stuff. But part of that was he was supposed to usher in this age where all the religions would unify to become this one pantheistic religion, which is again a theme you see over and over again when you read about the formation of secret societies and
Hmm.
occult groups. They all subscribe to the same thing, which if you look at Father Seraphim Rose's books about orthodoxy and the religion of the future, he explains it like this. He says, "Look, the reason they're doing that because on the one hand, as a society, there is a drive, at least from my perspective, of wanting to all get along and for everyone to be at peace with each other and for all of us to sort of respect each other.
Hmm.
But that can go to the point of dilution where you're watering down religion. So and this is from the Orthodox perspective, because like many Christian faiths, we think we're the right and true one, but we do go all the way back to the apostles. So I mean, there's that. But I know a lot of my listeners, they get a little offended when I start talking about this stuff. But so I understand that other Christian religions, you know, Catholics, Protestants, they probably don't subscribe to this, but that's okay.
Hmm.
But Orthodoxy believes that like this is the true faith, and everyone needs to follow this faith, or everyone should follow this faith if they want to have salvation.
Hmm.
But Father Rose said this is the way the game plan works, and he said this back in the '60s. He said they're going to introduce different ideas to make us think that God is just one source, and all these religions are different viewpoints of the same understanding of our world,
Hmm.
and this ultimately dilutes um, the truth about orthodoxy is kind of the way he described it,
Right.
is this, and it all contributes to the one world order, the new world order, where you know, if nothing's true, then there is no sort of like objective truth, is kind of the way he looks at it.
Hmm.
uh, you know, I don't know, people can take that how they want, but that's kind of the idea, is this new world that John Dee saw was later supported by all the secret society plans, like you know, the Bavarian Illuminati. They believed in
Hmm.
this idea. They thought that they could use science and rationality to make mankind become atheist. Meanwhile, the elites that were in the Illuminati, they were going to worship a sort of pantheist perennial philosophy idea of this vague universal force that was their god.
Hmm. And
um,
isn't that interesting that we just kind of saw this at the Republican National Convention, people praying to different versions of God, and everyone's like, well, we all believe in God, so it must be the same thing. And that's kind of, that's a fallacy. That's kind of like saying, well, we all have one mother, so we all have the same mother. That's not
Oh,
true,
interesting. I didn't
right?
actually see that. I didn't watch any of it.
Yeah,
I did see the New World Order imagery they had in the backdrop though, with the Great Seal and the dollar bill with the
uh-huh.
pyramid. I saw that. I mean, that was a little bit alarming.
Yeah, everything that happens now is kind of alarming if you've been paying
Yeah, I'm
attention.
curious to yeah, anyway, the one of the ideas, because you talked about the wife swap thing between
Hmm.
Edward and John Dee. There was That was one of the things, besides there's kind of a long sort of background to it, but during one of the rituals, this voice, a spirit named Madimi, commanded John Dean and Edward Kelly to swap wives, saying that because, and at the time, John D, more so than Edward Kelly, was sort of in the camp of Christianity, in the sense that he was like, no, we don't, that's adultery, right? I'm not going to do that. But the
Hmm.
spirit convinced him that these angelic commandments superseded these spiritual laws.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, he had some doubts about it. And they ended up swapping. And
Uh-huh.
apparently, the belief was that it would unify John Dee and Edward Kelly into being one sort of entity, and this would complete the final stage of the apocalypse. But the problem was John Dee actually didn't, to put it in nice terms, he didn't quite seal the deal.
Uh-huh.
Even though
Interesting.
Edward Kelly did in fact seal his deal with John Dee's wife.
Uh-huh.
So the next day, Edward Kelly gets a vision of the horsemen of the apocalypse, and from here they got a vision from the whore of Babylon, who told them, "I am the daughter of fortitude." And this from there, in Jason Louve's book, I certainly didn't come up with all this, because Jason Louve has a book about John Dee that's like massive. I mean, it's a huge undertaking to study John Dee.
Hmm.
But Jason Louve, in fact, I interviewed, if people are interested in more, I've got like this 2 hour insane interview I did with Jordan on my podcast. I think it was in January, anyway, about John Dee in this book.
Hmm.
So the whore Babylon appears, says, I'm the daughter of fortitude, and this is the spirit of Crowley's Babylon. It's the same entity, apparently.
Hmm.
You know, because there's all these connections, and to put a bow on it, what I'm saying is, from the time of Enoch to John Dee to Aleister Crowley in the New Age, these things all have a what do you call it? Like a
A thread.
continuity. They have
Yeah.
continuity, a thread. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So last time we kind of made a joke like because angels do appear to people. We've seen that in the Bible, you know, the Annunciation and the shepherds in the field and different times in history where it actually you will be visited by an angel if that's what God wants. But how do you tell if it's like angelic or demonic? And you kind of have to use your reasoning like God will never contradict himself. So he's not going to tell you to wife swap through an angel for to bring the world together, right? That's got to be on the demonic side of things. Angels are never going to tell you to, you know, do butt stuff and come onto our ship and come across the galaxy with us and jerk off for magic. So and what we're talking about, it's not just crazies. Like John Dee worked for the Queen of England, right? He was a spy. He was the original 007, right? So they had a whole network of you know, agents and people doing espionage and magic. And I just wanted to mention, so he was doing Enochian magic, and we talked about the Book of Enoch last time, and then um, Goetia and Enochian magic some people are equating like emojis and Pokemon to that. Have you seen that?
I mean, that sounds familiar. I haven't dug into that. No.
So like how you know the little sigils in Goetia look like different things. So they were putting all these emojis next to it and saying this is goetic and then maybe Pokemon could be that too because you are collecting um pocket monsters to
Oh,
do
see, these
yeah.
are all things that are like I just missed my generation. Like Pokemon was popular when I was like I don't know, turning 17 or 18 or something. So it was like too young for me. But I could see how the because what there's like 72 demons of Goetia and
Mhm.
Solomon's Key or something like that. And um I from what I understand, there's several Pokemon as well. So I mean, yeah, there might be some gateway into that occult thinking. I was researching it for my Twin Peaks analysis because in season 2 you see a couple of the sigils of the Goetia
Mhm.
depicted in the sheriff's department.
Oh, really?
It ties into a lot of the stuff with the owl cave and all kind. I mean, it gets deep into the world of Twin Peaks, but
Yeah.
you know, Mark Frost was heavily influenced by occult concepts when he wrote all those stories, and
Mhm.
uh, to be fair, he said he was a tourist in that arena, which is kind of how I look at it. That's how I feel about myself with occultism. I think it's
Uh-huh.
fascinating, and
Yeah.
I'm a tourist. I don't practice it though. So
I watched a video by a guy who calculated how much money, because magic and this stuff is not for the poors, okay? This is like you need a lot of time, a lot of you know, resources. So he picked a spirit out of the Goetia, the peacock one that helps you with math or whatever, and he calculated the ritual and how much it would cost to like get all the things that was needed. It was like $10,000 just to uh bring about this particular little ghoulie. So if you
yeah,
are
I feel like the elites. That's another common theme. Is it's there? There's a class structure to this whole thing for sure.
yeah. So John Dee, Edward Kelly, they were scrying. They saw this apocalypse. They said, switch your wives. And this is all happening also in the same time as around the Renaissance, and Kabbalah is getting really big. So have you um do you have anything to say about like Kabbalah as a whole or how this fits into the puzzle at all?
Well, it seems like all the occultists, Aleister Crowley and such, they always reference Kabbalah,
Mhm.
which is like, mystical Jewish stuff. And like, for instance, Aleister Crowley used a lot of symbolism from Kabbalah, like his universal hexagram is viewed upon as two lightning bolts, and the lightning bolts are certain paths down the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Mhm.
But the Kabbalah tree of life it seems to be heavily steeped into a lot of these occult practices and ideas and systems. Um, particularly with Kenneth Grant and Aleister Crowley talking to these entities on the dark side of the tree of life. And a lot of my understandings of all this comes from Peter Levenda, because he, when you read the sort of original documents and books from these magicians, it's very confusing. But Peter Levenda, in the book The Dark Lord, he breaks down a lot of this stuff,
Hmm.
and it seems like what they were talking about in early days of Kabbalah and Rosicrucianism and those types of things in the medieval times. A lot of those ideas, uh, they're trying to merge science with those in a way,
Hmm.
uh, with quantum physics, you could argue. And again, this probably goes into more of like the part three of type stuff,
Hmm.
but the ideas of the laws of entanglement and stuff like that, they I don't know. It seems like there's a connection there, because in Peter Levenda's books, he talks about how artists and creatives have a way of tapping into that dark side of the tree of life.
Yeah.
And this is where a
Yeah.
lot of the fallen angels, the entities of Klepoth, they call them,
Hmm.
are to be found.
And yeah, me and Jay just had a conversation about this, that art lots of times comes from a dark place because if you were hurt, if you were traumatized, if you were neglected, a lot of negative things that can happen to you will cause you to turn inward and make you very creative in your mind and artistic. So that is a way of coping with pressures of life is to create art, and a lot of art comes from a painful, dark place, right?
Hmm. Yeah, you see that a lot too, right? With a lot of our modern pop music, when people are, I guess like Taylor Swift going through a breakup makes certain, love songs or whatever. That's probably a sort of mundane example. And Lady Gaga, for a while there, she was hanging out with Marina Abramovic, and Abramovic was putting her through a sort of, I don't know if ritual is the right term, but a sort of a dark a dark sort of ritual, I guess. And her music got kind of weird and dark for a minute there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, there's something to be said for the I'm trying to think of a good example or a good quote from Peter Levenda of him talking about accessing the dark side of the tree of life. But you could argue that maybe in a Twin Peaks perspective, it's like they say fear unlocks the doors to the Black Lodge
Mm-hmm.
and love opens the doors to the White Lodge. And either one can let entities in, I guess, or worlds can cross a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I think there's something to, like, for me, I'm really intrigued by dark stuff as well. That's part of the reason I'm into all this conspiracy, occult type things. A lot of it's comes from being obsessed with horror movies in the 80s growing up.
Hey, I
Uh,
was raised listening to Bob Larson show on the radio. Have you heard of that guy?
that name rings a bell. I don't know who's he.
He was like a radio show host who did call-in exorcisms. I mean, it sounds,
Oh,
like theater. But when you're a kid, it's very real. Like you don't know that these are actors pretending to be demons and
oh, I've never heard of this.
oh yeah,
That's
you got
pretty
to look up
wild.
Bob Larson. So I don't know if half of that was true or half was false, but that's the kind of stuff like, a lot of people wouldn't last a minute in the asylum that we grew up in. So
Yeah. 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 Things were a lot darker in the 80s and 90s
yeah.
than they are today. I think it's because a lot of this goes back to I think it was Ronald Reagan who changed the laws, because it used to be back in the 70s and older, kids weren't allowed to be like children's programming was heavily regulated, and that's why it was only PBS and Sesame Street.
Mhm.
And in the 80s they deregulated it, and that's what gave us, I loved Masters of the Universe, He-Man and GI Joe and all that stuff, but the whole thing was a gimmick to sell action figures. It was all a way of, getting our
Mhm.
money. But whatever, like, I'm not trying to crap on that. I love those things. And I think they found a financial motive of drawing kids attention. And this is what, if you read Fast Food Nation, a lot of the food companies and the cereal companies, they practice this same technique because they know that if you can get a kid hooked in when they're young, like if I'm obsessed with McDonald's when I'm a kid, which I was, like we never got McDonald's back in the day. I would get it maybe it felt like I could be wrong, but it felt like maybe twice a year we'd get McDonald's, and I always wanted McDonald's, and like to this day I still like McDonald's. I obviously don't try not to eat it every day. It's it's poison, but
Hmm.
you make a lifelong customer if
Hmm.
you hook them and they're young. And one way to grab a child's attention is with horror movies and stuff like this,
Yeah.
with dark things that really grab your attention.
Yeah, and a lot of times the cartoon is just to sell the products. So it's just an advertisement for the cereal and the lunchbox and the plush toys, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking up your this Bob Larson guy. He was
Oh yeah.
apparently and I enjoy a lot of those Satanic Panic
Yeah.
like Good Faith Ministries. They make actually really good content. I mean, it's
I
not an
know.
angle
They
I
watched my
prefer to
show,
take.
I think.
Oh, really?
Well, he's
Yeah.
commented on it before. Yeah.
Oh, funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I actually really enjoy a lot of their content. I think it's really good. It's a little heavy-handed with the Christian themes, and that's not really my bag, but hey, they make good content.
Well, speaking of Christian magic, because a lot of this does cross paths, like I said, the high magic comes from Solomon, not Goetia, but the greater key of Solomon is all about angels in the angelic realm. And John Dee thinks he's talking to angels, right? And so this goes right into the creation of the United States and the Hellfire Club, Eliphas Levi, um, Albert Pike. And so you said in your book that you were talking about transcendental magic by Eliphas Levi. The magical agent is symbolized under the hieroglyph figure of Baphomet or the androgen of Mendes. So this is why androgyny is so popular because it's magical. It's not because all of these people were just repressing their desires to be a different gender. This is a magical spell that is being worked out. And androgyny is definitely a part of this. And then we have morals and dogma, where they say Lucifer is the light bearer. Um, and in your book, you point out the text actually says the light bearer is the spirit of darkness. So there's like, what do you make of that?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of this goes into, again, this is older stuff that sort of manifests in different ways in more modern occult circles. But from my sort of novice understanding of it, it goes back to the sacred marriage. And they're really into these opposing force principles of male and female, black and white, like with the checkered floor and the Masonic lodges, right? You've got the black and white checkered floor,
Mhm.
and it's called the Moses pavement. And it's not named after Moses from the Bible. It's named after muses. And this goes into an idea by Socrates and Eon had conversations where they wondered, where does the creative force of artists come from? Is it something the artist is able to sort of manifest from within? And their conclusion was that no, the artist actually acts like a muse, and the gods and goddesses will channel their energy and inspiration through the muse. So the
Mhm.
person is literally like a puppet being used by these otherworldly forces of gods and goddesses.
Mhm.
So that black and white checkered floor, from what I think is going on, and this goes back to because a lot of Freemasonry takes its cue from ancient Egyptian mystery schools and Greek Eleusinian mysteries.
Mhm.
But Isis and Osiris is again one of these sort of like mystery school analogies of alchemy. And if you asked me what I thought all of this meant, these they call it the reconciliation of opposing forces.
Mhm.
I think it's about merging good and evil, which are again two opposing forces that can come together. And this goes back to the Bible story of the Garden of Eden, where God told Adam and Eve, just don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Mhm.
And what happens? The serpent, this, Satan, Lucifer, whatever you want to call this force, uh, comes in like the Prometheus force and teaches and wants to teach man technology and says, No, you need to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil so that you can get the wisdom and the knowledge to become like gods. And that's what he promised Adam and Eve. And as the story goes, they get expulsion from the Garden of Eden, which was this supposedly beautiful, perfect place that God created for man. And now man is out here in the world, struggling to survive, whatever. And the occultists think that with technology given to them from Prometheus, Lucifer, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, who gave them the knowledge of good and evil, that they can recreate the Garden of Eden. They can create this perfect society or this perfected utopia,
Mhm.
which I don't think is possible from my point of view. I think man is flawed. I think look at the internet and social media. There's a lot of great things that come from it, but does it really make our world a better place ultimately in the end? I don't know. I feel like it pulls us further from nature and things like this. And it's interesting growing up as a person who didn't have the internet and sort of experiencing the world without the internet and then experiencing the world with. There's pros and cons to both, but and it could just be me being nostalgic, but I feel like times were simpler before the internet and
Oh yeah.
arguably better. I see
Definitely.
I've got a warning on my thing that says the recording's going to stop.
I know, I don't know where that came from. Should
Oh,
we
okay.
keep
You want,
going?
you want me to leave and then call back in and restart?
I don't want to edit this. Okay, let me pause it.